Good morning, everyone. We'll give those stragglers just another minute to get on. All right, well, we'll get started. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our morning lunch and learn. I know we're shaking things up a little bit, but today we have Dr. Jeffrey Schatz with us. He is a Fargo native and the owner and strategic planning consultant for Schatz and Associates, LLC. Over the past 3 years, he has worked with nearly 30 school districts in North Dakota, 10 nonprofit organizations in the Fargo-Moorhead region, and most recently with the city of Oakdale, Minnesota. He specializes in board governance review and development, leadership training, change management, and strategic planning and implementation. Before that, Dr. Schatz dedicated his life to education and youth in numerous roles, one of them being a longtime superintendent in the city of Fargo. We are very happy to have him with us today as he presents the importance and best practices of long-term planning in school districts. During the presentation, if you have any questions, you may pose them in the Q&A feature and I will do my best to moderate them in, or we will get them answered at the end. So now I will hand it over to Dr. Schatz.
Hey, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to spend some time here this morning and visit with you about strategic planning and long-range planning and all those types of things. So I'm going to do a couple of different things in my presentation here. I don't see anybody, so I'm assuming that you have access through your computer to the screens. And I'm going to do one interactive activity with you right at the beginning, of which you can use any device like your phone or your computer to weigh in on a question that I have for you. So having said that, I'm going to share my screen right now and get us loaded in here and get us started. So, okay, so let me get it into presentation mode here. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see this. So as you were told, my name is Jeff, and I was a superintendent here in Fargo, but also spent 21 years up in Grand Forks in their school system, and have done a lot of different things in the world of education, as well as adjunct professor at both UND and NDSU along the way. So in the last 4 years, I have been out working with schools across the state of North Dakota, up to almost 40 now, in developing strategic plans or working with them on how do you do this and how do you bring this all together as a process. And so I'm going to walk you through a PowerPoint as I explain some of the philosophical underpinnings of strategic planning, but also some of the details in how this can get done in school districts. And so to get us started, though, what I'd like to know is what would you like and hope to learn today from this session? And so this is a Mentimeter type activity. And if you go in on your phone, you can take a picture of this QR code, and that'll take you to this question, and I want you to input on there what it is you hope to learn today. And then that screen I have here live on my computer, I can see what your responses are. So for just this moment, if in fact the QR code doesn't work, you can go to menti.com and enter this code and bring it to you. So I'm going to drop this screen and go to that screen. So we're going to do a little bit of hopping around here. And And I'll have you weigh in right now if you could do that. Okay, as I watched the responses coming in, thank you for doing that. It really gives me a good good indicator of what we need to cover here today, because I have a lot to cover in a very short period of time. But if you do have questions along the way, certainly post them and we can try and answer those questions. So far, I've had 5 of you weigh in, and I hopefully you can see this on the screen. But here are the responses that I'm seeing from people. Samples of plans and who specifically should be involved in creating the plans. I'll cover a little bit of that and talk about what plans may look like, and can certainly direct you to some model plans that I believe have been done very well. What's the best way to communicate strategic plans within a diverse district? A lot of times strategic planning, long range planning is the challenge is exactly this. How do you communicate that? What I find with many districts and with many school districts is that plans are created, but they're created in isolation, and only the people who created them know of those plans. And so the idea here of long range planning, strategic planning, and other plans is to ensure that it's communicated and that it's part of the process of what you do as a district. In other words, it's a living, breathing document, and it's talked about all the time. It's monitored, it's reported at school board meetings, all those types of things. And so I'll talk about that communication piece. Ideas on how to implement a long-term plan. We talk about things, but how do we achieve them? That is the downfall of long-term planning, is many times people will put some plans together, but then they don't execute. They don't actually implement the plans. And so I'll talk about that. That's a big issue with long-term planning, regardless of what you're using, whether it's a 3 to 5 year plan, whether it's a strategy map, whether it's a strategic plan. It gets confusing for people. And so I'll talk about that. How to get the right mindset to begin strategic planning. It's all about planning in my mind. And school districts that I see that are running at a high and effective level have plans in place. They have structures and frameworks in place in order to support those plans, and again, monitor and make sure that those plans are a living, breathing document and exercised and executed within the district. So the right mindset is this, and I'll talk about this, reactive versus proactive environments. And a lot of times I find people in reactive environments. So we have to get to the right mindset. So that's an excellent question. Requirements in long-term planning. I'll cover that right at the beginning. And then it says, in a small population district, what types of long-term planning are common and where to start? I'll cover that also. I can tell you that I've worked with school districts with 150 students, and I've worked with districts like Bismarck, Grand Forks. Here in Fargo, I led the process in creating our strategic plan. So I have worked with districts of all different sizes. And the bottom line is that long-term planning, strategic planning, those types of things are applicable to all districts, just in different ways. And sometimes in the smaller districts, it doesn't have to be as robust, but having plans in place and creating those plans is very important. So I'm going to go away from this, and thank you for weighing in on that. That'll help us here with what we're going to do. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen just for a moment, and I'll come right back to you. Okay, I'll get back into sharing my screen now. And let's see here. Drop that. Okay, here we go. All right, we're going to stay with this now for the remainder of the time. So hopefully everybody can see this. So the question that came up initially was, what about what about the requirements of planning? Well, a lot of school districts know this, but some don't. And that is the North Dakota Century Code. This is it right here. There's a 3 to 5 year planning requirement. And this has been done in many different ways in school districts. Sometimes what school districts are doing is they'll put an agenda item on their board agenda, and they'll announce that they're going to have this public opportunity for public to come in and weigh in on the school district. And then when that moment comes in the board meeting, they go to that agenda item. Nobody shows up. They say, well, we met the requirement and we can move forward. I've seen school districts do that. In other school districts, they truly do this kind of process, and it's done in different ways. Now, the North Dakota School Boards Association and NDCL have created a template, and that template is pretty exhaustive and pretty robust. But what it does is it gathers lots of information about the school district. School districts have done that, and then they'll post that as required, as you see down here. So let's just walk through this real quick. But between January 1st and June 13th of every even numbered year, so 2020-22, the board of each school district shall invite the public to participate in a planning process addressing the effects that demographics might have on the district in ensuing 3 to 5 year periods, specifically addressing potential effects on, and then they list these things. Okay, and if you go to this template and get this template, it walks you through all the data collection that you need to have in order to probably have these conversations. A lot of school districts have filled out that 3 to 5 year plan template and posted that, and have actually had that as an agenda item at a board meeting. What other school districts have done and what I've done with this is that we have one time every 2 years, or you can do it every year, depending on what you want to do. You kind of have a state of the school district address. And so on a particular date, you invite public participants to come in and you give an update on the school district with regard to where you're at with certain things that you're doing in the district, addressing any of these kinds of issues. Give the opportunity for the public to engage in some focus grouping, asking them specific questions about what they think about the future of the district and how they can help you with the district, and then taking that information and using that information then to complete this kind of 3 to 5 year document. What I tell people though is this is not your strategic plan. This is the placeholder for all the data and the information and the questions that you pose with regard to what you should or maybe be doing in order to create those plans for your future. I see we have a hand raised up here, so I'll go to the chat. Okay. Okay, I don't think that's anything for me. So let me know if I do need to answer a question. Okay, I'm going to continue to move on then. So just know that this is a requirement. Most districts, from my experience, have not engaged in this at a very high level. Usually it's done in isolation, and most people don't even know it exists. So one of the things that you may want to check is, has your district done any of this kind of planning? Has it been on agendas? Was that offered to the public? And do you have anything that shows a report indicating, that you've come to some conclusions with those discussions? Again, this is not long-range planning. What this is it's filling out the template with all the data and information and answering some questions that you might that might be posed in order to get some ideas about that long-term planning. Okay, so I'm going to move on from this and just talk about some things in general. So why plan for the future? Well, I believe that data and planning are the two most important things school districts can do, the collection of good data and planning in a variety of different ways for their school districts. I believe in it strongly because it creates the framework and the structure for school districts to run effectively. And so when you ask the question, why plan for the future? When I was working with Watford City and Dr. Steve Holland, I asked the question, what would you like to see happen, and how will this impact your school district? And what he talked about was that the future planning process that they've done in Watford really brings the district to a point of a pause and a revisit to its leadership and governance models, and ensure that the outcomes and services for students in education are focused, and that the resources they have are being used effectively to carry that out. And so I really liked what Steve said here about thinking about why plan for the future. And I always talk about the need is we have to stay current and relevant. We need to embrace change, and there's been a lot of change in the last 2 years, and it sets the course for the future. So these three kind of guiding principles are the things I think about when I think about strategic planning. So when we go in and start to look at what is it we want to achieve, well, most districts that I go into and most districts that I've worked in have been in reactive models. And what that is that as issues come along, we spend a lot of time trying to solve those issues, and we don't have a lot of plans or structures in place, appropriate policies, those types of things. And so we struggle. And finally, we find solution, it goes away, and then the next thing comes, and the next thing, and we're constantly chasing the issues. In a proactive model, when we have structures and frameworks in place, good planning activities have occurred, we get to a more proactive model, so that when things occur, those disruptions become easily solved and we can move forward again, or we find equilibrium. Now, here's what I'll say about school districts and about the day-to-day activities in a school district. Running school districts as a school board member, a superintendent, principal, whatever position you're in, is a very challenging environment. And the reason that it's such a challenging environment is we're dealing with human beings. We don't manufacture a certain product and then go out on the market and sell it, those types of things. What we are is developing young people into the future adults that we'd like to see them be. And so along that way, it's a very complicated process, from the family structure, the parents, working with the school, working with the teachers, working with the administration, school board's oversight of the school district, the superintendent's leadership. All of those things are very complicated interactions. And so when we don't have structures in place, a lot of times we're dealing with this reactive model, and this is where we find ourselves. And almost every time that I show this to a group of people at a presentation, every one of them raises their hand and says, yep, that's exactly where we're at. So I believe that good planning can get you to a proactive model. I always talk about change, because when we talk about doing planning, we're talking about possibly doing some changing. And I think that's good. I think we need to have that conversation. So we find ourselves in our present state, and we're looking to find our desired future. Where do we want to be? And so the question has to be answered right up front. And I know one of the inputs that we had here at the beginning was, how do we set the mindset? Well, we have to answer the question, why do we want to do long-range planning? And if in fact, by doing that long-range planning, it might indicate that we need to change in some way, we have to answer the question why. And then we have to build capacity for people to come with us on that journey. And so I call that managing during transition, that transition. So we go from our present state, we answer the question why, and then we get to our desired future. And long-range planning can get you to your desired future. Every system that I've worked in Grand Forks, here in Fargo, the plans that we had in place really drove the focus of what we were doing. And we could outline our desired future, and we could answer the question of why we need to change to stay current, relevant, and all those types of things. And so that's really important in this process, is to understand that when you start to talk about planning, you're talking about possibly changing some things and doing some things differently. And that sometimes can be upsetting to people. So we have to bring them along. What's the outcome when you do strategic planning, as I call it? It's a high-level academic performance, students first. We talk about what is it that we hope to achieve, and ultimately, all of our efforts go towards students. And what about those students? What are we trying to provide for those students? And so that is the first thing. The second thing, vertical alignment throughout the school district. How do we ensure that the curriculum and the vertical alignment throughout the school district, from elementary through the middle school to the high school, that we're all on the same page? Many times when I walk into districts, I find that reactive model, there's very little communication between the elementary, middle school, and high school as far as what they're doing and how they're moving kids along through the system. and what is that curricular structure that they're providing for those students, and what are those transition pieces that they're ensuring are in place. Strategic planning can identify those issues within a district and then create the strategies to move the district towards that vertical alignment, if in fact it doesn't exist. The other macro outcome can be a comprehensive strategic plan, talking about what is our vision for the future, and then re-energizing the overall mission and vision of the school district. Many times we have mission or vision statements that were created in isolation. Process I use, we create those mission or vision statements or reorganize and renew the mission or vision statement with a larger group of people that gives it more of a comprehensive input structure. So these are kind of the macro outcomes that you hope for in a process. How do you make decisions? When you're thinking about making decisions in your district, what's the rubric you use? Well, if you have a good, strong strategic plan, all your decisions then are made by alignment through your strategic plan. If you don't have a strategic plan, you're making day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, yearly decisions without attaching those decisions back to what is your strategic focus. It also includes talking about resources. If you're going to do certain things, do you have the resources, both human resources and dollars? And then the last thing is sustainability. What I'm finding in a lot of school districts is that they're engaging in a lot of different activities, professional development, curriculum development, all these different programs that are out there. And right now, at my count, it's about 18 different initiatives that either the federal, state, or somebody is telling you you need to do in your district. And the reality is you don't have the capacity to do all that. You probably have the capacity to do two or three things really well. But if you don't have a strategic plan, what are you weighing those decisions against? And a lot of times what I find is it's cherry picking. We just do this, we're going to do this, this came along, and all of a sudden you find out you have this layering effect, I call it, and it's weighing down the district with regard to the outcomes that you hope and desire for, because there's too many things and it's too complicated and people don't understand it. And so it's all being done at a very low level of fidelity and a high level of resource input, which gets us not to the desired outcome that we hope for. There's a lot that goes into that when you think about it. So when I think about school districts, governance and planning structure, governance is school board. Strategic plan is a plan that drives the school district. The operational plan, that's the implementation. That's how we implement the strategic plan and monitor the strategic plan through the board and the governance model. So these are the structures that need to be in place, and they all interact. So what's board governance? Well, boards, really, there's three things that boards do. They hire and supervise the superintendent. They ensure that they have a quality individual leading the district that is providing that leadership throughout the district. They oversee the finances because there's taxes involved. They ensure that the district is using those dollars in a very high level of rate of return on their investments that they make within their district, that those dollars are being used effectively. And here's this part right here, setting the mission and vision and monitoring the results. That's long-term planning, making sure you have a mission and a vision in place, you have a strategic plan, you're monitoring the results of the school district on a monthly, quarterly basis, yearly, annual review of your plans, those types of things. Strategic planning, it's what I've been talking about. It's a living document, communicates your goals, priorities, need to achieve those goals, and the metrics, this is the key, used to measure progress on those goals. And here's the thing that I've added to this. It is a plan known by both the internal stakeholders, teachers, administrators, board members, and external stakeholders of the community. When I go to websites for school districts, I should be able to find somewhere in there and be able to click on what is your strategic plan. Quite frankly, that doesn't exist for a lot of school districts. Okay, so it should be known. It shouldn't be something that's hidden in a 3-ring binder in an office somewhere. And then we talk about all these pieces and parts. Should be a strong mission and vision statement. There should be a belief or a value statement, and there should be initiatives that focus on that 3 to 5 year period. And the focused strategic plan then aligns and strengthens operations and ensures that employees, board members, stakeholders, and all are working toward common goals. So that is a really strong statement with regard to what a strategic plan is and what it could be. Okay. What's the difference between strategic and operational planning? strategic planning, 3 to 5 years. The requirements from the North Dakota Century Code that I covered at the beginning, that document, if you have that filled out, it provides you great information to start having the conversation about how you create your strategic plan. But it's all these things here. And down here, you'll see identifies the needs for long-term plans. You don't create your long-term plans during the strategic planning process. Sorry, I'm going to go back here. You create those plans as they have been identified through your strategic plan, and they become some of the strategic initiatives that you engage in. The operational planning is short-term. It's what are the things you're going to work on the current year to help implement your strategic plan. So they're two different things. And then this is the one that you monitor throughout the school year and are getting reports back on how you're achieving the goals you set for. When I come in and work with school districts, I clarify this for people, and I work with the strategic planning committee to ensure that we understand what we're working on and then how will we implement that. And so that's the big bridge between the two that a lot of times people get confused. And then, you can get into all these terminologies about long-term planning. A lot of people talk about operational planning, and sometimes that gets confusing. So it's a yearly plan. The tactical planning is right at the ground level. Who, what, where, and how is it getting done? And how are we monitoring? And what are the conclusions made? So when you really get down to the frontline implementation of strategic plans, initiatives, goals, strategies, that's in that tactical area because we're identifying who's doing it, what are we doing, and where are we implementing the processes and all those types of things. So in the end, the desired outcome is to bring everything into one place. And what I find in school districts is that things are all over the place and there are different things that are going on. For instance, the Cognia school improvement process, that a lot of times stands alone in a district in an isolated silo. And then there's other plans that the district has. Well, the Cognia accreditation review is not a strategic plan. The strategic strategy maps that people are developing as required by the Department of Public Instruction and put on their website. Many times I have done seminars with 20, 30 people in a school district as I begin to work with them in their strategic planning committee. And I ask, how many of you know your strategy map? And I rarely get more than 1 or 2 hands that go up. So again, they're done in isolation. They're required. You get a report every 5 years. You're supposed to have an accreditation review, but it doesn't provide the level of implementation and strategic planning that I talk about. And so we bring that into the overall strategic plan process. So it's coordinated with the strategic direction we want to go. And I've talked about strategic focus and then results and measures. How are we monitoring? So when I put it together in kind of a roadmap for you, we talk about mission statements, vision statements, value, belief statements. These are important. I call these the 3 pillars of a strategic plan. Then we get into strategic priorities. What is it that we want to focus our work on? We identify what are those measurements and results. We align it to the continuous improvement process provided through the Cognia standards. And then eventually, once we have a plan, it's annually reviewed as you begin to implement. And so if in fact a school district can get this structure in place and start to use this structure, it creates that more proactive environment versus reactive. And I came up with this statement because when I was a practicing administrator and still in the game, leading schools and running school districts, hope for the best is not a strategic initiative is what it came to in my mind, because a lot of times we walk around saying, I sure hope it gets better, but we're not doing anything to make it better. And so it becomes kind of a false statement. And so hope for the best is not a strategic initiative unless you actually develop that. So what's the timeline? Well, if you get into a strategic planning process, excuse me, typically the best time of the year that I've experienced is August, is at August through October and November through May. Starting in August and October, year one, where you collect data, you do all the things to prepare yourself, and I call that scoping, to engage in a strategic planning process. The planning then occurs usually in October, November, December, into January, where hopefully you have a plan that you're approving, and sometimes it'll go through May. It just depends on the school district. Currently, I'm working with 5 school districts, and we're kind of all over the place on the map with the timing here. But eventually, you get a plan in that first year approved. So that's the strategic planning. You start to implement in year 2 in the fall. And then as you're implementing, you start to monitor the results, and those analysis and results occur throughout the year. And at the end of the second year now, that's the first year of implementation, you're actually looking at the results that are occurring through the development of your plans. So to prepare for strategic and long-term planning, you collect data. A lot of times I've worked, every school district I've worked with, we've done surveys, I've done focus groups with bringing community members in, collecting more information, both internally and externally. We analyze that. We talk about, okay, what's our project plan? What are we hoping to achieve? And then we actually create a strategic planning committee. And that committee can be, depending on the size of the school district, it can be anywhere from 10 people to, I've worked with committees of 60. But in my mind, this is the process that people should go through in order to set the stage and that mindset of putting together a strategic plan and developing long-term goals. What should it look like? I believe in broad representation. So it's board members, administrators, staff, students, community members, others. I've seen lots of different configurations of this. This is just an example, 12 to 20 people. But like I said, I've had committees that are much larger and some that have been right around that 10 to 12. During that process then of the strategic planning, we use different ways of getting feedback. And like I said, the focus groups, and then as you experienced today, the Mentimeter piece is something that I've used, and we have live interactive meeting feedback as we go through the process. It works pretty nicely. So you may be thinking then, okay, so what are you talking about? I mean, what is a strategic plan? Well, the strategic plan, you start to identify what are those big anchors, those things that you want to make sure that you're identifying as priority areas. And right down here, you can see I highlighted in red. This is where most strategic plans are missing. A lot of them sometimes are just focused on a few things in the area of academics, but they miss this piece right here, long-range plans. And so this is an example of, through the conversations with the planning committee, through conversations with the leadership teams at the school, what are the areas we're going to focus on? And then we identify within those areas the specifics. What are the things that are going to be those strategic initiatives, which get further developed with goals, strategies, and progress monitoring. So what are long-term plans? I believe that long-term plans should exist in the following areas right here. Long-term facility plans, long-term operational maintenance plans. How are you maintaining your schools? And what is the budget line for that? And do you have a plan in place that identifies year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the things that you currently need to get done with maintenance, or things that you know down the line you'll need to do, and have those plans in place with cost estimates and all those things in front of you so that you can budget for it annually in a more consistent way. Long-term financial plans. There should be a long-term financial plan that exists that shows past historical data, current information, and future assumptions about the school district and what may be needed or what may happen in the future when it comes to finances. There should be some kind of long-term technology plan beyond just the budget plan for equipment. There should be some kind of plan in place about how we're using the technology, how is that being implemented within the curriculum delivery systems that we have and structures. And so what is it we're doing with technology versus the need to replenish or replace or obtain the hardware, software, all the other things associated with it. And I do believe that if a district does what I call a standard of effort report, which is a comparative report of like-sized school districts with regard to what is the effort you're putting forth compared to other school districts in the areas of finance, in the areas of staffing, all those types of things. And so there are standard reports that I can share with school districts and walk them through the process of developing that. When it comes to these other long-term plans, these are all outside of strategic planning, but what school districts do is they identify the need for this. And then that first year, a lot of times it's starting to develop the task force or group or committee that is going to start to develop those plans. Strategic plan, big overarching plan, academics, and let me go back again, all these things. And then in long-term planning, that's where this stuff falls within, let's go back, this area right here. So let's look at a couple of examples. I'm going to try and do this and see if it'll work. But two examples that I think are excellent is Bismarck and Central Cass. If you go to their websites, you'll find their strategic plans, but you'll also find the plans that they've developed in these other areas. I've worked with both of these school districts, and I believe that they're exemplar examples of how you can develop these plans within your school district. And again, those plans were identified in the strategic planning process as needed to be developed. And then implementation of the strategic planning plan that they put together in the area of developing long-range plans was the outcome. So that's that operational piece, right? Developing those plans and getting them in place. And so that's, I just want to make sure that's really clear. It's a separate process. So I'm going to do this and hopefully it'll work. Because sometimes things get a little bumpy on my computer if I pop onto the same website as we're on right now. So let me see if I can get there. Oh, good, it worked. Hopefully you can see this. You go to Central Cass and you look at their website and you go to About, you go down to Strategic Plan right here. This is what I'm talking about, a website and being able to see a strategic plan. You click on that and you get this page right here. In here, you can look at their full strategic plan that I helped them develop, but you can also see all of the other plans that they've put in place. It's really cool, and it's really done well. And so as you look at their overall initiative areas, so these were the large anchors I talked about. Here are the goals they had, and in here you can see long-range facilities, technology, financial plan, so you can see where they were building all of that with their strategic plan. And right now they're going to start to look at reviewing their strategic plan for the future again, because now it's getting out to that third or fourth or fifth year. So I'm going to go back and away from that. Make sure I don't cut us off here. Yeah, I want to go back to here. And let's go and see if we can get to the Bismarck one. So if you go to Bismarck, same thing. If you go to, I believe this one's under their school board. No, right here, they have it right on their website. That's been a while since I've looked at it. But here again, you can see, you can go and find their strategic plan. You can then look at the different plans they've put together. Again, very well done. So these are exemplars. And I know somebody asked, what are some examples of strategic plans? If you're in a smaller district, obviously the plan's not going to be as big as something like Bismarck. And Central Cass has a good comprehensive plan, kind of a mid-sized school. And I would say the Central Cass example is similar to what you would find with a smaller school, but just every strategic plan just seems to be a little different. Okay, which I think is a good thing. When I come in and work with school districts, I tell them that we're building your strategic plan, not somebody else's. And so I always try to make that really clear with people. And then here's an operational roadmap and what it can look like. What's the initiative, the goal, the objective? What are the monitoring strategies and monitoring we're going to do? Who's it assigned to? This is more of that tactical planning. What's the timeline? How is it aligned with Cognia? And then over here is the space to put in what is the progress we're making. So if you're a board member, and you have a strategic plan and you're monitoring your plan, this is the operational roadmap you can put together. You don't have to spend a bunch of money on it. You can develop a table. Some people want to go out and purchase different websites or apps that can help report the results of it's a waste of money. This here is a very simple way. And so let's say we're monitoring this strategic initiative under the academic engagement anchor, multi-tiered systems. We're monitoring, it's coming to the board for a report. The school district administration or leadership team creates a template like this. And over here, they'll write in what the progress is they're making. And on that evening, when you report on it, they're reporting to you how they're implementing, what are the goals that they had and how they're trying to do it, and then what they're seeing in progress. And then it really provides a nice way for school boards then to have this all in front of you in one way, one page. And then the next school board meeting, you're monitoring another area of your plan. You just fill in the differences here. What I create for a school district when we do a strategic plan is this roadmap or template up to the point of assignment. I fill all this in from what they gave me, but then I give it back and the school district then has to sit down with their team and do these pieces. Okay. All right, so for today, that's kind of what I had for you. And I'm going to go to stop sharing my screen, open this up, and let's open it up to any questions that people might have. And I know our time is getting a little bit more short, but I'm willing to stay here as long as I need to. So are there questions that I can answer for people on this? I see Stacy. I see you're part of the group here, so I'll just say hi, Stacy. How you doing?
We have one in the Q&A feature. How long does it take to start the process? 2 years?
Actually, so let's think about that. So, for instance, if people want to engage in a process, and regardless of how you do it, whether you have somebody come in and help you do it, or if you're doing it on your own, you could start it next fall. You could start it in August. I have currently 5 school districts that have reached out to me, and we're creating an agreement, and I'll be coming in and working with them starting in August, for example. And then from August we develop kind of a timeline with that. That's what I do with the school district. And then we work through the process. And so typically 3 to 6 months is the process, depending on the school district and their ability to move it along, because again, it's a collaborative effort. I don't write your strategic plan. I help you develop your strategic plan. And so it's a matter of how quickly the district wants to work on it. I will tell you the most successful districts that I've worked with in this process are the ones who are dedicated to the process. And if you choose to engage in the process and invest in it, then there needs to be follow through. There needs to be dedication on the side of the school district to get it done. And so all those things are big factors. But ultimately, you could start it this fall. It just depends on where you're at as a school district and what your capacity is to do something like this.
We have a comment from Stacy. Bowman is in the middle of the process and it has done great, or has gone great. Mr. Schatz does a great job leading our district forward. Thank you, Stacy.
Any other questions that anybody has? So I guess I don't hear any other questions, but if people have questions that come up and you want to get a hold of me, I'm more than happy to respond back to you. If you want to email me, that my email is on the screen, and there's my phone number. But I'm more than happy to answer questions for people. If you go back, talk to a couple of people in your district and say, hey, we should do this, and questions come up, we can have that engagement. A lot of times too, what I've done with school districts is done a Zoom call just like this with the board to answer questions if they're considering something like this, or with the superintendent. I work directly with the superintendent through the school board, work closely with the school board president typically. Want to make sure that all of those folks are online and on the same page with the process. That's when it goes the best. So if there are any other questions, I'd stand for any other questions. Otherwise, I'll leave it to our host to decide what you want to do.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's see here. We do have another comment from Pam. Central Cast really enjoyed working with Dr. Schatz through this process. As the business manager, he was also instrumental in helping me connect with people and other resources to create our financial plan. Thank you, Pamela.
Yeah, and I would just say that Pam has done an outstanding job in Castleton in developing their financial plan. And if you want to see what one can look like, you should go to that Central Cast website. It's really well done. And Pam has just been excellent in making that happen. So, yeah.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Well, with that, we will finish it up here, but thank you all for joining this morning, and huge thank you to Jeff for presenting to us. Please feel free to contact Jeff. We will post all that information on our website. The recording, the presentation, other informational materials will be available on the events page under the Lunch and Learn webinar series tab, again at 9 a.m. Central Time with NDSBA's Amy DeCook. You can access more information about our Lunch and Learn webinar series on our website on the events page. Have a great rest of your day and week, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.